The morning sun blazed over the crowded streets of Accra as Kofi pedaled his ancient bicycle through the chaotic traffic of Ring Road. Sweat poured down his face, soaking through his cotton shirt as he maneuvered between trotros, taxis, and the occasional luxury car that gleamed like a promise of a different life. The bicycle, a rusted Chinese model his father had bought 15 years ago, squeaked and groaned with every revolution of its worn wheels. At 23 years old, Kofi Mensah worked as a sales clerk at Mobile City, a phone shop tucked between a fabric store and a chop bar near Makola Market. The job paid him 1,200 cedis a month, barely enough to contribute to his mother's household expenses, buy his own food, and save a pitiful amount that never seemed to grow, no matter how carefully he counted his coins. His father had died when Kofi was only 8, leaving behind a widow and 3 children in a compound house in Nima, where privacy was a luxury and everyone's business became the community's entertainment. Kofi's mother, Ama Mensah, was a strong woman who had raised her children with dignity despite their poverty. She sold kenki and fried fish at the Nima market every day, waking at 4 in the morning to prepare her wares. His younger sisters, Ama, 16, and Abena, 14, were both in secondary school, their fees paid through a combination of their mother's savings, Kofi's contributions, and occasional help from their uncle in Kumasi. But despite the stability of their humble life, Kofi felt suffocated by his circumstances. Every day he watched his childhood friends transform into men of means while he remained stuck in the same place, like a cassette tape on repeat. His best friends from Nima Junior High, Kwame, Yao, and Kojo, had all somehow managed to acquire the symbols of success that Ghanaian society worshipped: cars. Kwame drove a silver Toyota Camry with tinted windows and a sound system that made the ground vibrate when he played his hip life music. Yao had recently purchased a jet black Honda Accord that still had the new car smell. Even Kojo, whose family was poorer than Kofi's, had somehow scraped together money for a used Nissan Sentra. They would cruise through Circle, East Legon, and Osu, picking up girls, going to clubs, living the life that Kofi could only observe from the periphery. Every Friday evening, the group would meet at their usual spot, Papa Joe's drinking bar in Nima, where they sat under the mango tree, drank cold bottles of club beer or Star, and talked about their week. But increasingly, Kofi felt like an outsider in his own friend group. "Ah, Kofi, you still riding that bicycle, eh?" Kwame had laughed last Friday, stepping out of his Camry with his girlfriend, a light-skinned girl from Legon named Akosua. "Massa, you're 23 now. When will you join the big boys?" The others had laughed, but Kofi saw the pity in their eyes. It was worse than mockery. Pity meant they no longer saw him as an equal, but as someone to be sympathized with, someone left behind by the march of progress. "You know my situation," Kofi had responded, trying to keep his voice light. "I'm saving. Soon." "Soon, soon, soon," Kojo had chimed in, shaking his head. "Brother, we've been hearing soon for 3 years now. At this rate, you'll be 40 and still on that bicycle." The words had stung because they were true. At his current rate of saving, it would take Kofi at least 10 years to afford even a decent used car. By then, his friends would have moved on to even bigger things, and he would still be the bicycle boy, the one who couldn't keep up. That night, lying on his thin mattress in the room he shared with his 2 sisters, a small space divided by a curtain for privacy, Kofi made a decision. He couldn't continue like this. He needed to find a way to get money, real money, enough to buy a car and finally earn the respect of his peers. He didn't know how yet, but he was determined. His pride, his dignity, his very sense of manhood depended on it. What Kofi didn't know was that this decision, born from wounded pride and desperate ambition, would lead him down a path that would cost him far more than any car was worth. But that realization would come later, when it was already too late to turn back. 3 weeks after his humiliation at Papa Joe's Gar, Kofi found himself sitting across from Yao at a quiet chop bar in Asylum Down, far from their usual haunts. Yao had called him that morning with an unusual request. "Meet me at Auntie Mercy's place at 7. Come alone. I have something important to discuss." The secrecy intrigued Kofi. Yao wasn't typically the mysterious type. He was loud, boisterous, always the first to make a joke or start an argument about football. But on the phone, his voice had been serious, almost conspiratorial. Now, as they sat at a corner table with plates of jollof rice and grilled tilapia between them, Yao leaned forward and spoke in a low voice that barely carried over the high-life music playing from the speakers. "Kofi, I'm going to tell you something that I haven't told the others, but you have to promise me. What we discuss here stays between us. You can't tell Kwame, Kojo, or anyone else, especially not your family." Kofi's curiosity deepened. "I promise. What's going on?" Yao glanced around the restaurant, ensuring no one was paying attention to them, then continued. "You know how everyone has been wondering how I got the money for my Honda? How someone like me, my father drives a taxi, my mother sells wakye, suddenly came up with 50,000 cedis for a brand new car?" Kofi nodded. It had been the subject of much speculation. Some people said Yao had won the lottery. Others whispered about Sakawa, internet fraud. A few suggested he'd gotten involved with drug dealers, but Yao had never confirmed or denied any of these rumors, simply smiling mysteriously whenever anyone asked. "I'm going to tell you the truth," Yao said, his eyes intense. "But first, you have to understand something. What I did was perfectly safe, perfectly legal. There's a whole industry around it. People do it all the time, especially in India, Pakistan, even in South Africa. It's just not talked about openly in Ghana because people don't understand." "What did you do?" Kofi asked, his heart beginning to race. Yao took a long drink of his Malta Guinness, then set the bottle down with deliberate care. "I sold one of my kidneys." Kofi's fork clattered onto his plate. Several diners turned to look, and he quickly recovered it, lowering his voice to a harsh whisper. "You did what?" "A kidney," Yao repeated calmly. "I sold one of my kidneys to a private buyer through a medical broker. The operation was performed at a clinic in East Legon by a qualified surgeon. I was in and out in 3 days, fully recovered in 3 weeks. They paid me $20,000, about 90,000 cedis at the current exchange rate. After the broker's fee and medical expenses, I walked away with 50,000, enough for my car and some savings." Kofi stared at his friend, searching for signs of a joke, but Yao's face was completely serious. But isn't that dangerous? Don't you need both kidneys?" Yao shook his head, warming to his subject now. "That's a misconception, my brother. Human beings have 2 kidneys, but we only need one to live a completely normal life. It's like having 2 eyes, 2 lungs. It's redundancy built into our biology. Thousands of people around the world donate kidneys to family members, and they live perfectly healthy lives afterward. The only difference is that instead of donating mine for free, I sold it. What's wrong with that?" "I don't know," Kofi said uncertainly. "It just seems wrong somehow, like selling a part of yourself." "We sell parts of ourselves every day," Yao argued, his voice taking on the passionate intensity of a preacher. "When you work at that phone shop, aren't you selling your time, your energy, your youth? When your mother wakes up at 4 in the morning to sell kenke, isn't she selling her health, her strength? At least with this, it's one-time pain for long-term gain. I'll never have to struggle for money the way my parents did. I can invest, start a business, build something real." Kofi sat back in his chair, his mind reeling. A part of him was horrified at what Yao had done, but another part, the part that was tired of being poor, tired of being mocked, tired of pedaling that squeaking bicycle while his friends drove past in air-conditioned comfort, was intensely interested. How does it work?" he found himself asking. Yao smiled, recognizing the shift in Kofi's tone from shock to curiosity. "There's a man named Dr. Mensah, yes, same surname actually, who runs a private medical facility in East Legon. He connects people who need kidneys with people willing to sell them. The buyers are usually wealthy Ghanaians or foreigners with kidney failure who can't or won't wait for the official transplant list. They pay premium prices for healthy kidneys from young donors." "Is it legal?" Kofi asked. His expression became evasive. It's complicated. Technically, organ sales are illegal in Ghana, but kidney donations are legal. The way Dr. Mensah structures it, officially you're donating your kidney to help someone in need, and the compensation is framed as compensation for your time, medical expenses, and recovery. It's a legal gray area, but the clinic has been operating for 5 years without any problems. They're very careful, very professional. And you're really okay? No health problems? None, Yao insisted. I feel exactly the same as before. I go for checkups every 3 months just to be safe, and my remaining kidney is functioning perfectly. The doctor said as long as I stay hydrated, eat healthy, and avoid excessive alcohol, I'll be fine for the rest of my life. Kofi was silent for a long moment, pushing the rice around on his plate. The restaurant seemed to fade away as his mind calculated possibilities. $20,000. 50,000 cedis after expenses. He could buy a car, not just any car, but a good one, maybe even better than Ya's Honda. He could have money left over, help his mother, maybe even start a small business on the side. If I wanted to do this, Kofi said slowly, how would I contact this Dr. Mensah? Ya's smile widened. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, sliding it across the table. The card was elegant, cream-colored with embossed gold lettering. Dr. Kwabena Mensah, MD, FACS, Advanced Medical Solutions, by appointment only. Think about it carefully, Ya said. Don't rush into anything, but if you decide you want to take control of your life, want to stop being the guy everyone pities, call that number. Tell them Ya referred you. They'll take care of everything. Kofi pocketed the card, his hand trembling slightly. He tried to finish his meal, but he'd lost his appetite. His mind was already racing ahead, imagining himself behind the wheel of a Honda CR-V, or maybe a Toyota RAV4, imagining the look on Kwame's face, imagining taking his mother to church in style on Sunday morning. The price seemed reasonable. After all, he had 2 kidneys. What did he really need both of them for? It would take Kofi another 6 weeks to make the final decision, but in truth, the moment he pocketed that business card, his fate was already sealed. The Renaissance Medical Center didn't look like the kind of place where illegal operations were performed. Located in the upscale neighborhood of East Legon, it was housed in a modern 3-story building painted pristine white with manicured gardens surrounding the entrance. A discreet brass plaque by the door announced Advanced Medical Solutions, Private Healthcare Excellence. Mercedes and Lexus sedans filled the parking lot, suggesting a clientele that could afford the best medical care money could buy. Kofi had called the number on Dr. Mensah's card 6 weeks after his conversation with Ya. Those weeks had been filled with internal debate, research on the internet at a cafe in Osu, and sleepless nights weighing his options. He'd read testimonials from kidney donors who claimed to live normal lives. He'd also read horror stories, but he'd convinced himself those were exceptions, worst-case scenarios that wouldn't apply to him. The deciding moment had come 2 weeks ago when Kwame had hosted a party at his new apartment in Lebon, a modern 2-bedroom flat with air conditioning and a balcony overlooking the neighborhood. All their friends had been there with their girlfriends, drinking imported beer, laughing, taking selfies. Kofi had arrived on his bicycle, parking it shamefully behind the building where it wouldn't be seen. Throughout the party, he'd felt invisible, standing in the corner while conversations flowed around him about cars, investments, trips to Dubai and London. The next morning, he'd made the call. The initial consultation had been surprisingly professional. A pleasant receptionist had scheduled him for a screening appointment, asking basic questions about his health history. At the clinic, he'd met Dr. Mensah, a man in his late 40s with graying temples, gold-rimmed glasses, and the confident bearing of someone who'd spent prestigious medical institutions. Mr. Mensah, the doctor had said with a warm smile, I understand you're interested in our kidney donation program. First, let me assure you that everything we do here is completely safe and medically sound. I've performed over 200 kidney transplants in my career, and every single one of my donors has gone on to live healthy, normal lives. The screening had been thorough. Blood tests, urine analysis, kidney function tests, CT scans, a psychological evaluation. Kofi had passed everything with flying colors. His kidneys were, in the doctor's words, absolutely perfect specimens. At 23, with no history of diabetes, hypertension, or kidney disease, he was an ideal candidate. The financial discussion had come next. Dr. Mensah explained that the compensation would be $20,000 paid in cash immediately after the surgery. After the clinic's administrative fees, surgical costs, and post-operative care, Kofi would receive exactly 53,000 cedis, enough for a good used car and some money to spare. I must emphasize, Dr. Mensah said, his tone becoming serious, that you cannot tell anyone about this procedure. Not your family, not your friends, no one. For legal reasons, we maintain absolute confidentiality. If you violate this confidentiality, you'll forfeit your compensation and could face legal consequences. Do you understand? Kofi had nodded, though the warning had sent a small chill down his spine. Still, he'd reasoned, wealthy people kept secrets all the time. This was just business. Now, 3 days later, Kofi lay on a hospital bed in a private room on the clinic's third floor. He told his mother he was traveling to Kumasi for a business opportunity and would be gone for a week. His sisters had been told the same story. His supervisor at Mobile City had reluctantly granted him 7 days of unpaid leave. A nurse, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, came to prep him for surgery. She shaved his left side, inserted an IV line into his arm, and gave him a mild sedative. "Try to relax," she said gently. "Dr. Mensah is one of the best surgeons in West Africa. You're in good hands." As the sedative began to work, Kofi felt his anxiety melting away, replaced by a dreamy euphoria. He thought about the car dealership he'd visited last week, the champagne gold Honda CR-V sitting in the showroom like a trophy waiting to be claimed. The dealer had promised to hold it for him for 2 weeks. Soon, very soon, that car would be his. Dr. Mensah entered the pre-op room, already dressed in surgical scrubs. "Ready, Kofi?" "Yes, doctor," Kofi mumbled, his tongue feeling thick. "Good. The procedure will take approximately 3 hours. When you wake up, you'll have some pain and discomfort, but we'll manage it with medication. You'll stay here for 3 days for observation, then continue recovery at home for another 2 weeks. Follow all my instructions carefully and you'll be perfectly fine. Any questions?" Kofi tried to think of something to ask, but his mind was growing foggy. "No questions." "Excellent. See you on the other side." The last thing Kofi remembered was being wheeled down a bright corridor, fluorescent lights passing overhead like stars, and the sensation of floating as the anesthesia pulled him under into darkness. When he woke, the first thing he felt was pain, a deep, burning ache in his left side that made him gasp. A different nurse was beside him immediately, adjusting his morphine drip. "Easy, easy. The pain is normal. The medication will help." As the morphine kicked in, the sharp edges of the pain dulled to a manageable throb. Kofi turned his head and saw Dr. Mensah standing at the foot of his bed, reviewing a chart. "Congratulations, Kofi," the doctor said with a smile. "The operation was a complete success. Your kidney is already functioning perfectly in its new host. You did well." Kofi tried to smile back, but his mouth was dry. The nurse gave him ice chips to suck on. Over the next 3 days, Kofi remained in the clinic, drifting in and out of sleep, taking pain medication, being monitored constantly. Yao visited once, bringing a basket of fruits and encouraging words. "You see, I told you it was fine. In 2 weeks, you'll be driving your car and wondering why you waited so long." On the 4th day, Dr. Mensah discharged him with a thick envelope of cash, 53,000 cedis in crisp bills, and a list of instructions. Rest for 2 weeks, No heavy lifting, drink at least 3 liters of water daily, eat a balanced diet rich in fruits and vegetables, avoid alcohol for at least 3 months, come back in 2 weeks for a follow-up appointment, then monthly for the next 3 months. If you experience any unusual symptoms, fever, excessive pain, blood in your urine, call me immediately." Kofi nodded, clutching the envelope to his chest like a life preserver. He'd done it. Despite the pain, despite the fear that had gripped him when he woke from surgery, he'd done it. As he left the Renaissance Medical Center in a taxi, his hand pressed against his bandaged side, Kofi allowed himself to feel triumphant. The hard part was over. Now came the reward. He couldn't wait to see the look on everyone's face when he showed up in his new car. Chapter 4. The Glory Days. The Honda CR-V gleamed in the afternoon sun like a golden chariot as Kofi drove through the streets of Accra for the first time as a car owner. The champagne gold paint seemed to glow, the leather seats still had that intoxicating new car smell, and the dashboard display looked like something from a spaceship. Every time he pressed the accelerator and felt the smooth surge of power, every time he adjusted the air conditioning or changed the radio station with the steering wheel controls, Kofi felt a rush of pride so intense it was almost physical. He'd collected the car from the dealership exactly 2 weeks after his surgery, the very day Dr. Mensah cleared him to resume normal activities. The dealer had been effusive in his congratulations, throwing in free floor mats and a first-year service package. Kofi had driven straight to his compound house in Nima, parking the CR-V prominently in the courtyard, where everyone could see it. The reaction had been everything he'd dreamed of and more. His sisters had screamed for joy, running their hands over the smooth paint like it was made of gold. Abena had jumped up and down, shouting, "We have a car! We have a car!" Amma, more reserved, had simply hugged him with tears in her eyes, whispering, "I'm so proud of you, big brother." His mother's reaction had been more complicated. Amma Mensah had stood in the doorway of their home, wiping her hands on her apron, looking at the car with a mixture of wonder and suspicion. "Kofi, where did you get the money for this?" He'd rehearsed this lie for weeks. "Mama, remember that business opportunity in Kumasi I told you about? It worked out better than I expected. A friend and I imported some phones, sold them for a good profit. I took a small loan to help with the business, and now I'm paying it back small." She'd studied his face with those knowing eyes that had seen through his childhood lies, but finally she'd nodded. "Just make sure you pay back this loan properly."